Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Ingested, Ashes Lie Still, out November 4th on Metal Blade Records. The album has 10 tracks, 44 minutes in length, and this is the band's 7th full-length studio record. They are a death metal band from the UK. From a design point of view, I really enjoyed how this album is put together. It takes the most, or it gets the most, out of the sound that it holds. When you look at the opening track and the closing track, you see how important they are to the overall design of the album and how important they are in order to create a record that's engaging, fluid, and dynamic from start to finish. Ashes Lie Still is the opening track, and this song is very different from the rest of the album from a vocal point of view. Scratch the Vein is the closing track of the album, and that song is very different from the rest of the album musically. Having two songs that are different, but different across different parameters, really allows you to have a sense of beginning and end, but that end really pushes you right back into that beginning, giving you a sense of going full circle as far as the overall experience is concerned. Ashes Lie Still is a track that uses clean vocals to create atmosphere. Atmosphere is not something that you're going to see on this album, or at least it's not going to be an element that's going to be predominant throughout the entire record. But it's important to be within that opening track because it lays a seed and then allows itself to reappear throughout the album, even though not as a driving element, but it allows itself to reappear and feel a little bit blended in with the overall brutality that this album has. Scratch the Vein is a song that closes the record, and closes the record with a lot of atmosphere, perhaps the most atmospheric song on the entire album. The vocals are better connected with the rest of the experience that the album offers, while the sound goes in a very different direction, offering you a clear sense of finality. It's a more melancholic track, definitely a darker song, but like I said, it takes a little bit of the air out of the balloon right at the end. It gives you a sense of closure as far as the experience is concerned, but it also connects really well in terms of how the album starts, moving the atmosphere from sound into the vocals of Ashes Lie Still. In between, you have songs that are that live off of the brutality and heaviness that the album has, but there are a few here and there that change the dynamic ever so slightly, creating an album that has a lot of mobility, that has a lot of movement, a lot of ebbs and flows, super engaging. This is not one of those death metal records that you get to the end of the album and you enjoy the experience, but nothing really stands out in the crowd. This record allows itself to have strength within the collective, but also have the strength of the individual songs pushing through at every single turn. As far as the overall sound experience is concerned, the brutality of this record is definitely the calling card, is definitely the main spinal cord of what moves the record. But it's a multi-dimensional sounding album. It has groove, it has technical elements, it has melancholy as far as the atmosphere is concerned, it has darkness, it has an engaging sound experience that makes this record feel heavy, powerful, but still very well defined in its moments, and in all the mechanisms that drive that same heaviness, that drive that same power. It's not an album that becomes hard to process or hard to navigate through. Some of the orchestrations that they used were important in order to thin out that heavy wall of sound that comes at you. Sometimes you need to take a little bit of a break. You need to take a little bit of a breath. This album breathes really well sound-wise because it doesn't become repetitive. It's not monotonous. You don't feel like the songs are offering you the same experience track in and track out. You can't just create an album that is brutal and heavy and just rely on those two elements to really carry the listener all the way through and have the impact that you want to have, which is bring the listener back to the album again. This record definitely uses brutality and heaviness as that main DNA, as that main calling card, but there's so much more packed into that sound that creates that heaviness, that creates that brutality, that makes the album feel heavy, but still thin enough that you can process, digest, navigate it through, and understand exactly what your path is, where you're going, and how you're going to get there. I truly enjoyed the sound experience of this album. It was a lot more dynamic, it had a lot more life, it had a lot more energy, a lot more texture, and definitely depth than I was expecting coming in. I was expecting the album to be more one-directional and one-dimensional, and that's not what I got from start to finish. Now, as far as the drums are concerned, I enjoy the drums on this record. It's an album that has texture, and a lot of the depth of the sound really comes from the drums. grounding the album, bringing the mood down, adding heaviness, adding power, adding aggression, and then propelling all of that forward with a lot of heaviness and with a lot of strength and a lot of direction. The drums are a little bit of the catalyst that moves this record. While perhaps you're going to connect more with the guitars and all the different attributes that they offer, the drums allow the guitars to be a little bit more free. They have more room to roam, they have more room to breathe, and therefore the overall soundscape of this album really allows the listener to enjoy all the different momentums. The guitars bring in grooviness at times, some really groovy riffs, some technicality aspects as well. This allows the overall texture of the album to be a little bit more interesting. It's an album that doesn't move the sound just based on how it's put together at the beginning all the way to the end. It allows the guitars to go off the beaten path, dive into different arenas, but always find a way of coming back to that same starting point. That is perhaps the only real formula that you're going to find song in and song out as far as the overall design and the overall execution of the sound is concerned. But the guitars, in terms of what they offer, how lively they are, really allows the album to have that energy, to have that movement, to be that engaging, and it offers the different perspectives that you're going to find across all 10 songs. Vocally, it's interesting because they have a few guest vocalists, two of them, Matt Hiffy of Trivium and Sven of Aborted. This to me was really important because sound-wise, this album pushes the parameters. It doesn't have this idea of keeping everything controlled, keeping everything boxed in, and the experience that you get in the first track is going to be the similar experience that you're going to get across all other 9 songs. This album really expands and contracts quite a bit as you move down the line. When you have an album that does that, you need the vocal approach to not necessarily match it, but almost kind of go with it. And when you have guest vocalists, and on this album they have 3 guest vocalists, I feel like you're adding a little bit of spice to the overall vocal performance. On a record, like I said, that it has songs that throws a little bit of salt into the recipe, into the mix, into how the dish is being prepared, having those guest vocalists does exactly the same thing, but now in a vocal sense, not in a musical sense. But when you tie those two worlds together, you have an album that's always taking the listener in the same direction. I never felt on any song that things were disconnected, that the album was chaotic, that the album didn't have an idea or they didn't have a purpose. This album is extremely well connected from what the sound experience offers and what the vocal performance delivers. Great record, super entertaining, very engaging, and it doesn't overwhelm the listener. I think this is really important for a death metal band specifically. So often you listen to death metal albums that you feel like they're great, but at the end of it, somebody asks you what's your favorite song, and you're like, well, they kind of all sounded the same. This record is not like that, and I think that is really important in order to give this album life beyond just listening to it once or twice or 3 times. You want the album to be fresh every single time you press play, and this album has the right characteristics to offer that experience. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I'm going to start off with You'll Never Learn. This song has a heavy, methodic approach to it. The heaviness is the main attribute, as it is on every single track. But that still allows the guitars to be groovy. It still allows the guitars to kind of break through and kind of weave themselves around that heaviness, sometimes creating even more heaviness and sometimes thinning it out. Allows you to feel like there are breaks in the overall big wall of sound that it's coming at you. The vocals add to the level of heaviness and thickness that the track has. The orchestrations are a very thin layer on this track, but really important because it helps thin out the sound every so often. So when you're feeling like you're really being pushed against the wall, you're really on the edge as far as the overall brutality of the track is concerned, those orchestrations come in and they take a little bit of that weight off, allowing you to better process the track and allowing you to not feel overwhelmed by it. It's important in the overall design, and I like the fact that they don't control the overall design of the song as well. They're just part of the track, they're not the track. Next we have Echoes of Hate. This is a song that feels like it's stepping on you. You feel like you're being pummeled as far as the overall design and overall execution, with the drums sounding very heavy, very powerful, and the guitars then adding to it, and the vocals as well. This song is musically heavy and vocally heavy. It still has moments where it's a little bit more driven, where the stomping stops and the track moves a little bit faster. This makes the track feel very dynamic. because there's no smooth transitions. You go from being stomped on to being thrown up in the air. There's only those two complete opposite momentums, and they come at you with a lot of intensity, and this makes the track feel like it has a lot more energy. It also makes the track feel like it's pushing itself, and it's losing control, but it's never really losing control because it stays within that format. The last third of this track is perhaps the best part of the track. So talk about reaching a climax. That last third is definitely the climax of the song. It feels demolishing. It's just heavy, it's slow, it moves, but it's still like absolutely pounds you. It makes the song feel like a complete banger the way it ends. Perfect ending for a track that had that sort of controlled chaos all the way through. Last but not least, definitely the last song on the record, Scratch the Vein. This is one of my favorite tracks on the album because of the atmosphere that it has. No song even comes close to how this track sounds, to how this track feels. It is dark, it is somber. That atmosphere is there in the sound and how the sound comes forward. The other interesting element about this track is that vocal performance, while connected with the rest of the album, it felt a little bit more methodic in its movement in order to stay on pace and on course with the sound that they had created for the song. So the essence of the vocal performance is connected to the rest of the album, but how it's delivered, it's slightly morphed in order to fit the design of this song a lot better. And I like that because you feel like you have one foot in the past of what you've experienced and a foot right towards the future of where this song is taking you. Incredible track to close off the record. It could not be anywhere else on this album or would kill the flow of the record. This is it. This is Ingested with Ashes Lie Still, out November 4th on Metal Blade Records. Now let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.